Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 lecture series of corporate and business law. So far in this course, we have clearly understood what makes an agreement a valid contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, free consent and lawful object. But merely satisfying these elements is not enough. The law goes one step further and clearly tells us that certain agreements, even if entered into with consent, are not allowed at all. And that brings us to today's topic, that is, agreements expressly declared as void. An agreement expressly declared as void is one which the law itself declares to be void, regardless of the intention of the parties. In simple words, the Indian Contract Act clearly says this type of agreement will not be enforced by law. Now, these agreements are void ab initio, which means void from the very beginning. Now, let us understand each of these agreements one by one exactly to understand each of its meaning. Section 26 of the Indian Contract Act states that every agreement in restraint of the marriage of any person other than a minor is void. This means you cannot restrict a person's freedom to marry. Marriage is considered a fundamental social right. For example, if A agrees to give B a certain amount of money on the condition that B will never marry, such an agreement is void. However, restraint of marriage of a minor is valid. The law believes that marriage decisions should remain free and voluntary and not controlled by contracts. Moving ahead, let us now discuss agreements in restraint of trade. Section 27 states that every agreement by which anyone is restricted from exercising a lawful profession, trade or business of any kind is void. This means freedom of trade is protected. Any agreement restricting this freedom is void. For example, if A agrees that he will not carry on his profession as a lawyer anywhere in India, such an agreement is void. Exception to this is sale of goodwill. That means the Act provides one very important exception. The seller of goodwill may agree not to carry on a similar business. So, while trade is free, reasonable restrictions in specific cases are permitted. Next, we come to agreements that restrict legal remedies. An agreement which restrains a person from enforcing his rights through legal proceedings in a court of law is void. This includes absolute restriction on filing a suit or limiting the time within which legal action can be taken. For example, if a contract states that no party can approach any court under any circumstances, such an agreement is void. Let us now understand agreements that are uncertain in nature. According to section 29, agreements, the meaning of which is not certain or capable of being made certain, are void. This means the terms of the contract must be clear. Any vague agreements cannot be enforced. Whenever there is room for confusion and ambiguity, such agreements will be considered as void. For example, A agrees to sell B 100 tons of oil, but the type of oil is not specified. This agreement is void due to uncertainty. However, if uncertainty can be resolved later, agreements will become valid. Clarity is the foundation of enforceability. And finally, we come to one of the most exam favorite topics, that is wagering agreements. A wagering agreement is one in which two parties agree upon the happening or non-happening of an uncertain future event. One party will win and the other party will lose money or money's worth. For an agreement to be called as a wagering agreement, it must have the following essential elements. That is, firstly, there has to be uncertain future event, and there has to be mutual chances of gain or loss. That is, if one person wins, the other person should lose. And there should be no control over the event and also no other interest except winning or losing. For example, A and B bet on the result of an IPL cricket match. Now such an agreement is void. Therefore, wagering agreements are void. Collateral transactions are also void. The law discourages speculative and gambling activities. So to summarize, agreements expressly declared as void are those which the law refuses to recognize irrespective of the content or intention and consent. These include agreements in restraint of trade, marriage, legal proceedings, agreements void for uncertainty, and wagering agreements. Understanding these provisions help us clearly differentiate between what the law allows and what it strictly prohibits. With this, we conclude an important part of week 3. Revise these sections carefully because these questions from agreements expressly declared as void are mostly the favorite topics in most of the foundational level professional exams. So in the next session, we will continue building on these concepts as we move further into the special types of contracts.